Act 2, Scene 1. The scene then switches to the wife of Antipholus of Ephesus, Adriana, who is at home with her sister, Luciana, waiting for her husband to arrive for dinner. Considering her husband is running late, Adriana is not in the best of moods. Neither my husband nor the slave returned, that in such haste I sent to seek his master. Sure, Luciana, it is 2 o'clock. She begins to have a bit of a chinwag with her sister about the differences between men and women. More specifically, why women are held to a certain standard and why men can pretty much get away with anything. Why should their liberty than ours be more? She moans to Luciana, who, funnily enough, actually ends up siding with men. Because their business still lies out of the door, she replies. Basically telling Adriana that because her husband goes out to work, it's reasonable that he'll be less punctual than her when it's dinner time. But Adriana isn't convinced, and she continues to argue her point that men, notably her husband, can get away with anything, but women, most notably her, would be chastised for doing the same. To this, Luciana basically concedes that this is simply the way of things. Men are the masters, and women ought to just accept it, because to rebel against man is futile. This leads the two women to talk about marriage, and both characters are shown to be polar opposites of each other, at least when it comes to relationships. Adriana is the strong, fiery wildcat who isn't afraid to grab her man by the balls if he starts acting up, whilst Luciana is the more docile, obedient, mild mouse, who would probably let her husband even cheat on her if he wanted. I suppose it's a good thing she's not married. Anyway, Dromio of Ephesus comes running in, and he's had a pretty crap day considering he's been beaten up by who he believes to be his master. When Adriana asks the servant where her husband is, Dromio of Ephesus replies, "Nay, he's at 2 hands with me, and that my 2 ears can witness." Which is basically Dromio of Ephesus telling Adriana that her husband attacked him. Of course, Adriana doesn't really care about all that, and doesn't really even acknowledge Dromio of Ephesus' condition. Doesn't even ask him if he's okay. She only wants to know where her husband is, and what his plans are. Is he coming home for dinner or not, damn it? Aye, he told his mind upon my ear. Beshrew his hand, I scarce could understand it, Dromio of Ephesus says. Or, his plans are beating me up, Dromio of Ephesus explains again, almost like he's trying his best to elicit some form of sympathy from his master's wife. He is never actually given any, but say, I pray thee, is he coming home? It seems he hath great care to please his wife, Adriana tries again, really adamant to know if she should leave the food out on the dining table or wrap it all up and stuff it in the fridge. To this, Dromio of Ephesus boldly declares, "Listen here, love, your husband is nuttier than squirrel turd." Or, to be more Shakespearean, "Why, mistress, sure, my master is horn mad." Adriana takes great offence from this. Sure, her husband was late to dinner, but he wasn't mad. She calls Dromio of Ephesus a villain, and might have said a lot more if the servant didn't quickly explain himself, telling her of all the things that were said to him by the man he believed to be his master and her husband, Antipholus of Ephesus. Quoth my master, "I know," quoth he, "no house, no wife, no mistress, so that my errand, due unto my tongue, I thank him, I bear home upon my shoulders, for in conclusion, he did beat me there." Adriana is astonished to hear these words and doesn't quite believe them. Why would her husband deny knowing his house and his wife? She believes there's much more to this than the servant is telling her, and so she demands that he go out again and bring back her husband. Dromio of Ephesus is much less enthusiastic this time, considering the last beating he received, and actually tells her, "Nah fam, send someone else." "Back slave, or I'll break thy pater cross," Adriana tells him. And here we see that Dromio of Ephesus is damned if he does and damned if he doesn't. Either he gets beaten up by his master, or he gets beaten up by his master's wife. And considering how volatile she is, it isn't completely certain which one was worse. Dromio of Ephesus is so worked up that he compares himself to a football, saying that his master kicks him one way and his master's wife kicks him the other. He even tells Adriana that if he does come back, they should make him into a real football and wrap him up in leather. Am I so round with you as you with me, that like a football you do spurn me thus? You spurn me hence, and he will spurn me hither. If I last in this service, you must case me in leather. Dromio of Ephesus decides the beating from his master isn't as bad as a beating from his wife, so he decides to go out again in an attempt to fulfill Adriana's wishes and bring him back for dinner. This leaves Adriana and her sister, Luciana, alone again, where Adriana begins to break down with insecurity. She starts to believe that her husband is spending time with other women, which can be the only explanation as to why he has not come home for dinner yet. She begins to let her emotions and her thoughts run away with her, deciding that she'd lost her looks now that she was aging, and that in actuality it's all her husband's fault because he stole her looks by treating her unfairly. She then considers her own wit, her humour, her personality, convincing herself that maybe he just found other women sharper than her. But that, again, this is his fault, because he had spent her wit and her humour and her personality. Poor I am, but 'tis stale, she laments. Luciana pretty much tells her to stop being insecure, and that jealousy of other women he's not even seeing mind you, is quite unbecoming. But Adriana is adamant now that her husband Antipholus of Ephesus is cheating on her. Why else wouldn't he be at dinner? She then tells her sister that he'd promised her a golden necklace and gone out to retrieve it, but that she'd give up the necklace if he'd return to her this very moment. Sister, you know he promised me a chain. With that alone, O love, he would detain, so he would keep me fair quarter with his bed. She concludes that since her beauty can no longer sustain his eye, she'll cry off whatever beauty she has left, and then die weeping. Luciana pretty much rolls her eyes at her sister's dramatics and declares, "How many fond fools serve mad jealousy?" Or simply, too many people are in love, but at mercy of their own jealousy. Act 2, Scene 2. Now, back to Antipholus of Syracuse at the marketplace, who's still scratching his head over what had transpired earlier. It appears that he has learned that the money he'd given to Dromio of Syracuse did indeed make it to the Centaur Inn, and that Dromio of Syracuse did reserve them a couple of rooms. However, after doing so, Dromio of Syracuse left the inn and went in search of him. This doesn't make any sense to Antipholus of Syracuse, because he thinks he had only just beaten Dromio of Syracuse, who was actually Dromio of Ephesus. Either Dromio of Syracuse was moving at some ungodly super speed, or something was certainly amiss. Still, Antipholus of Syracuse is relieved that the money he had given his servant made it to the inn, and that they, at the very least, have a place to stay. At this stage, Antipholus of Syracuse spots Dromio of Syracuse and begins to question him over the conversation he believed they had earlier. "How now, sir, is your merry humour altered? As you love strokes, so jest with me again. You know no centaur, you receive no gold. Your mistress sent to have me home to dinner. My house was at the Phoenix. Wast thou mad, that thus so madly thou didst answer me?" Of course, Dromio of Syracuse has no idea what Antipholus of Syracuse is on about. He'd never had this conversation after all. "What answer, sir? When spake I such a word?" he begins. "I did not see you since you sent me, hence home to the Centaur with the gold you gave me." Antipholus of Syracuse is not amused. He cannot believe that Dromio of Syracuse is denying the very exchange that had most definitely transpired between the two of them. "Villain, thou didst deny the gold's receipt, and toldest me of a mistress and a dinner, for which I hope thou feltest I was displeased." To Dromio of Syracuse, this seems like one big joke, and he remarks upon his master's mood being jolly, believing that Antipholus of Syracuse is playing some kind of gag on him. To his surprise, Antipholus of Syracuse starts beating him up as well. He tells his servant, rather menacingly, Because that I familiarly sometimes do use you for my fool and chat with you, your sauciness will jest upon my love, and make a common of my serious hours. When the sun shines, let foolish gnats make sport, but creep in crannies when he hides his beams. If you will jest with me, know my aspect, and fashion your demeanour to my looks, or I will beat this method in your sconce. Basically, he tells him that when he's in a good mood, Dromio can make all the jokes he wants, but when he's in a bad mood, Dromio should know his place as his servant and not try to mess with him. Of course, to Dromio of Syracuse, this is all a bit confounding. He cannot fathom why he's earned this beating, nor why his master is so upset, much less what he means when he speaks of their earlier conversation. In a matter of moments though, master and servant are joking about the beating and begin talking about the passage of time, comparing it to the hairs upon a man's head. After some philosophy, it would appear that both men have put the incident behind them and have simply chalked it up to a misunderstanding. That is, of course, until Adriana and Luciana make their way towards them. Aye, Antipholus, look strange and frown. Some other mistress hath thy sweet aspects. I am not Adriana, nor thy wife. Adriana storms her way towards Antipholus of Syracuse, believing him to be her husband Antipholus of Ephesus, and accuses him immediately of adultery and neglect. Antipholus of Syracuse doesn't even realise she's talking to him, considering he doesn't know her and has never seen her before in his life. She berates Antipholus of Syracuse openly, pouring her heart out to him, as she declares, "How dearly would it touch thee to the quick, shouldest thou but hear I were licentious, and that this body consecrate to thee, by ruffian lust, should be contaminate. Wouldst thou not spit at me, and spurn at me, and hurl the name of husband in my face, and tear the stained skin off my harlot brow, and from my false hand cut the wedding ring, and break it with a deep divorcing vow?" To us, she's obviously challenging how, who she thinks to be Antipholus of Ephesus, would feel if she was the one gallivanting around with men, and how he would feel if she was the one who had been having an affair. How he'd probably strike her in anger and tear from her finger the wedding ring before divorcing her. To Antipholus of Syracuse though, he is thinking, what in God's name is going on, and who in the blue hell is this crazy woman shouting at me? He tells Adriana, as calmly as he can, "Please you to me, fair dame, I know you not. In Ephesus I am but 2 hours old, as strange unto your town as to your talk, who every word, by all my wit being scanned, want wit in all one word to understand. Or, put simply, I don't even know who you are." Luciana jumps in now and chastises Antipholus of Syracuse, who she also believes to be Antipholus of Ephesus, for shunning her sister. She also declares that Dromio had gone out looking for him, and that he had refused to return home with him. Dromio of Syracuse, who is obviously being mistaken for Dromio of Ephesus, is like, "Who, me? I didn't talk to anyone." But Adriana calls him a liar, repeating the report that Dromio of Ephesus had given her, that Antipholus had refused to come home, that he had no home and had no wife. All eyes turn upon Dromio of Syracuse now, none the least being Antipholus of Syracuse, who now suspects his servant of conspiracy. After all, the very words that Adriana now says are the same words that Antipholus of Syracuse had told Dromio of Ephesus when he had asked him to come home for dinner. This leads Antipholus of Syracuse to believe that Dromio of Syracuse has been informing Adriana about him for some reason. He condemns his servant when he tries to defend himself, saying, "Villain, thou liest, for even her very words didst thou deliver to me on the mart." Poor Dromio of Syracuse has no idea what he's being accused of, yet all participants appear to have confused him with Dromio of Ephesus, causing the blame to stick to him. But Adriana is done with the theatrics of the day and decides all she wants is to be with her husband again. She declares, "Be it my wrong, you are far from exempt, but wrong not that wrong with a more contempt. Come, I will fasten on this sleeve of thine. Thou art an elm, my husband, I a vine, whose weakness married to thy stronger state makes me with thy strength to communicate. So even though she expresses a certain zeal for freedom and scoffed at her sister's notions of obedience and docility, she is now the one who takes responsibility for his affair and decides she is too weak to stand without him. Therefore, in spite of his adultery, which hasn't actually transpired by the way, she will cling to him anyway because he is the strong elm tree, the man, and she is the weak vine, the woman. Individually, she believes they are lesser, but together, through marriage, they can both be strong, even though the elm tree can actually stand on its own, and it's really only her who needs him by this metaphor. Antipholus of Syracuse is actually moved by her passion and decides that he probably did marry her after all. Well, in a dream anyway, or that maybe he's dreaming now, and none of what he's experienced here in Ephesus is actually real. So with that, he decides to entertain the charade until he can figure out exactly who this woman is, how she knows him, and whether he actually is who she says he is. He declares, "To me she speaks, she moves me more for her theme. What, was I married to her in my dream, or sleep now and think I hear all this? What error drives our eyes and ears amiss? Until I know this sure uncertainty, I'll entertain the offered fallacy." Dromio of Syracuse is a bit more concerned, and who can blame him considering the madness unfolding around him? He believes that they haven't arrived on Ephesus at all, but instead some realm of insanity, full of monsters and ghouls that now hold them hostage. Still, he manages to keep his cool as he says to himself, "Oh, for my beads, I cross me for a sinner. This is the fairyland, oh spite of spites. We talk with goblins, owls and sprites. If we obey them not, this will ensue. They'll suck our breath, or pinch us black and blue." Adriana demands that Antipholus of Syracuse, again believing him to be her husband, Antipholus of Ephesus, has dinner with her, where they can put behind them all of today's shenanigans and work at being husband and wife again. She demands that Dromio of Syracuse, again believing him to be Dromio of Ephesus, guards the gate of the house, and that should anyone come looking for her husband, he should tell them that he's dining out, and not let anyone enter. Antipholus of Syracuse, meanwhile, is ushered into the house by his newfound wife Adriana, where he begins again to ponder on his reality, trying to decide if what he experiences is real or fiction.